Outer Orange.
Hey, these are decks, and today we're going to talk about hand testing.
Recently, someone accused me of pretty much saying that I decide meta based off, hand testing, which that isn't true. Take that out of there. But it did give me a good idea to talk about hand testing in general, so that's why we're here.
Because hand testing can actually help you with competition, trying out different styles, maybe some tech, some kind of options for you that may help you in your general deck building. OuterOrange here, and welcome back to my channel. While I have you here, do not forget to shop at 50cards.shop for your cards that you may need for any future sets for Card5 Vanguard. Use my code ORANGE to save yourself some cards and all that kind of fun stuff.
So what is exactly hand testing? What does it do, and what is the concept of it? Let's get down to business. Hand testing is pretty much when you decide to take a deck that it's already complete, usually, and you pretty much just test out how it feels, or if you have already been comfortable with the deck and you've been playing it for a couple of months or weeks, days, however much it is, you may just want to see some more lines of play to just kind of see how the deck functions. And sometimes you may not always have an opponent with you to kind of do these sort of things, so in order to properly get some extra practice in between your days, it's just good to hand test. It's kind of like daily drawing, like when you just want to draw something every day. This kind of has a similar concept of doing just a little bit of hand testing every single day to just get used to the idea of constantly playing cards. So it may sound stupid to just kind of sit there and hand test, but sometimes it's really useful. And the idea behind hand testing isn't like if you just do this, that's enough, that you'll just know a deck, or you'll understand a deck, or you'll understand meta. No, that is incorrect. You cannot just go off hand testing to assume that what your deck does is going to do it correctly. You of course need opponents to do that, and that could be its own whole video about how to properly test with opponents and all that kind of stuff. But when you're just by yourself, or you're watching a show, or between a lunch break, sometimes it's good to just get a little bit of hand testing in, whether it's a new deck or an old deck. Something I like to do is sometimes people will proxy out decks, and I may not have time to exactly play a game with someone or something, so I'll just ask them if I could just look and see through the deck, because the way I learn is by visually seeing the interactions happen. I can't just read a card and know exactly the interaction with the exact card with the exact patterns. Once I actually see it, it makes my brain turn on and go, oh whoa, that's how that works, that's how this works, that's how this synergizes with this. A lot of D stuff, usually when I want to proxy it first, is usually where I see its elements, and then I'll actually start testing against people, or I'll build the deck myself, and then I'll actually start pushing and doing all that kind of stuff. But that being said, how can you use hand testing in your daily life to improve your ways to pretty much play the game?
A lot of this, of course, comes down to how you learn and what best suits you to understand a deck and how you want to understand it. For me, a lot of visual cues really help me. I'm a pretty forgetful person, so if I just keep doing the same action over and over again, I have pretty strong muscle memory to where I'll usually get better at it. For you, the experience may be different. Actually, maybe hand testing isn't even for you. It might not even be beneficial at all, so it's just something you'd have to try out and see for yourself. But ideally, what you want to do is you want to get comfortable with the deck so much that you know every single card, and a good way to do that is by hand testing in between testing with people throughout your days as you're getting ready for competition.
Something I like to do actually is pretty much take one card, like a tech card, and kind of just shove it in the deck, and then just do like about 8 to 10 games just to see how often that card comes up. So usually this is really good for techs, just to see how often the tech comes up and if it's worth it, because some techs can come up more depending on how your deck searches, and some techs can come up less with how your deck searches. And then if I really like the tech, then I'll actually just go ahead and take the deck and find someone to play with and actually test out how the tech works in retrospective. So that's usually sort of my steps of hierarchy of hand testing, and then going to opponent, and then go back, and then hand testing, and all that jazz, all that. So here we actually have a sample of me just straight up testing some techs. I was preparing for the V-Shop challenge that happened a couple days back recently, and I was testing how useful Karunta and Callum is in this case, and I was trying to see how often the techs actually just come up, how often I see Karunta, how often I see Callum. In this situation, I believe I re-innovated into the Callum, and then I was trying to figure out if I preferred it on the board or if I wanted it to just stay hidden, and just kind of decide what do I do in the situations where I do see it in top 3. And actually, as I was testing, I found that the card has a lot of good uses, and I was trying to imagine my situation where if I'm into a Luard matchup, or if I'm into Orange matchups, if there's certain situations I want to bottom deck certain things as I attack. And then along with that, also it was just useful to see sort of where the card comes up and how often it comes up, if it's good in the early game, if it's good in the late game, since I did only run one copy in the situation. And just being able to utilize sort of what to do was just really useful. Having in the bind zone, just seeing kind of where the applications of the card come into play. And like I mentioned in the past, sometimes you just don't have the time to constantly test into people to see small small text, or if you just want to see how something works and then take it in, take it out, you can do that here. And that's actually sort of what I did. I just tested it and want to see like how often do I want to see this card, if I want to up it to 2 or just go back to just Karunta as a normal game plan. So I use this technique a lot, usually when I'm about to compete, usually during like my lunch breaks at work, or if I'm watching a show. I tend to hand test a lot. It's just something I like to do with myself. It's almost like a form of meditation almost to me. I know that sounds like super freaking weird, but it helps me relax if I just see how the cards interact and what they do. And of course, after testing with some people, you know, like after, you know, spending some time like testing on a deck, sometimes I like to just take a break from a deck and just not play against anyone at all, because sometimes playing against people actually sets my mentality a little wonky. Like sometimes I'll be testing against someone and I'm losing and I'm losing and I'm losing, and sometimes it actually backfires. So sometimes just testing the deck again and seeing how it functions through like just hand testing really helps a lot too. That's really all I have. I really don't know what inspired me to create this video. I think this subject isn't very discussed a lot because I feel like some people might even frown upon the idea of hand testing. I think if utilized correctly, it can actually be extremely useful. And like I said, you don't have to do this. This is just something that I do actually quite a lot. I will usually hand test a lot, probably more than I need to. It's just become such a habit now that sometimes I even do it as while I'm listening to stuff, or you know, if I need to listen to something and I want something to do with my hands, I tend to just like start whipping out a deck and just literally start testing while I'm listening to whatever's going on around me. And it just helps me. Like I said, everyone has their differences ways. Of course, this is the only way I test, and maybe I'll make a video on like different kind of testing things that I do, because obviously hand testing is just one of them. There's actually probably like maybe 7 other things that I do along with hand testing. The amount of time and effort that I put into just taking decks and competing with decks is actually kind of ridiculous. I don't know why I do this to myself, but I just love card games so much, right? And I know this video is kind of generic. Of course, I'm mainly talking about card game Vanguard, but this can be applied to pretty much any card game. I'm almost positive this can be applied to any card game. That includes digital card games, that includes using some kind of emulators, you know, or simulators, or just anything that kind of helps with doing it online. You can actually use CFA to even hand test online. You can just see how a deck works and then go compete with some people. And I like to use this as an analogy too. When I used to play League of Legends competitively, I used to go into like custom games and just literally poke down bots and just get used to like auto attack. If you know what I'm talking about, then yay for you. You've spent hours on League just like I have. But I used to be a big DPS main. I used to be a big ADC main, and part of, you know, being ADC is perfecting the art of constantly last hitting. And I would used to just go into custom games and just last hit everything on the map just to get used to farming like that. And to me, that concept of that kind of muscle memory is similar to how hand testing works in card games. So that's where I correlate it. And if you're one of those people that can see it that way too, that's the best way to put it. So just keep in mind, this shouldn't be the only tactic for properly playing. You should be doing other things too, like actually playing games in order to get better at the deck that you're on. But this is one of the steps that I take to improve at the game. So yeah.
And that is really all I have for you guys today. Stay awesome, stay great. Do not forget to touch grass, even if it's not green. Don't forget to do that. Hit the like, subscribe button if you really enjoyed what I did today, and see you guys in a future video. Bye.